Behind each statistic lies a catastrophe so vast it reshaped continents, toppled empires, and rewrote history. These are 10 of the most devastating tragedies the world has ever endured, some remembered, others buried. But all still echo in our lives today. Number 1. The Taiping Rebellion, China's apocalypse of faith. Between 1850 and 1864, one of the most lethal civil wars in history erupted across China, taking an estimated 20 to 30 million lives, more than the population of the United States at the time. The rebellion was led by Hong Xiuquan, a failed exam candidate who experienced a fever dream and declared himself the younger brother of Jesus Christ. He launched a violent crusade against the Qing dynasty, establishing the Heavenly Kingdom with its capital in Nanjing. His regime banned opium, alcohol, and traditional Confucian teachings, yet imposed brutal punishments and forced conversions. The war destroyed entire provinces. Starvation followed military slaughter. Some towns lost 80% of their population. British and French forces, fearing instability, eventually sided with the Qing. The rebellion's failure left China shattered and ripe for future foreign domination. How could a single man's vision of salvation become one of the deadliest religious wars in history? Number 2. The Black Death, the pandemic that reset the world. From 1347 to 1351, the bubonic plague swept across 3 continents, killing somewhere between 75 and 200 million people, nearly half of Europe's population. The disease likely originated in Central Asia and traveled west through Silk Road trade routes. It arrived in Europe via Genoese ships docking in Sicily. Within weeks, entire towns were overwhelmed. Victims died within days, their bodies covered in black buboes. In London, corpses were buried in plague pits, some so large they held 10,000 bodies. The terror caused economic collapse and mass hysteria. Art turned apocalyptic. Some nobles fled to private estates, while others indulged in wild debauchery, convinced the end had come. Ironically, the population drop triggered labor shortages, giving surviving peasants unprecedented power in weakening feudal hierarchies. Did the Black Death destroy the Middle Ages and spark the modern era? Number 3. The Mongol conquests, death, empire, and the birth of a new world. In the 13th and early 14th centuries, Genghis Khan and his descendants created the largest contiguous empire in world history, but at a cost of 30 to 40 million lives. The Mongols employed scorched earth tactics and psychological terror, destroying cities like Samarkand, Nishapur, and Baghdad. In 1258, the sacking of Baghdad, then the intellectual heart of the Islamic world, left hundreds of thousands dead and libraries reduced to ash. Mongol armies used advanced logistics and intelligence networks, even incorporating Chinese siege engineers. Yet, their legacy wasn't solely destruction. Under the Pax Mongolica, merchants traveled safely from Beijing to Venice. Paper money, gunpowder, and medical knowledge flowed along revitalized Silk Roads. But the cost in human life remains staggering. Some estimates suggest the Mongols reduced the global population by 11%. Is it possible that one of history's most violent empires also laid the groundwork for globalization? Number 4. The Great Chinese Famine, when policy killed millions. Between 1959 and 1961, China experienced one of the deadliest famines in human history, not due to nature, but disastrous government policy. Chairman Mao's Great Leap Forward sought to transform China into a modern industrial power overnight. Steel production was prioritized over farming. Villages were collectivized. Officials exaggerated harvest numbers to meet impossible quotas. The state seized grain as if the fields were full, when in reality, they were barren. As food vanished, starvation set in. Up to 45 million people died, many in remote provinces like Anhui, Hunan, and Sichuan. Eyewitnesses reported families reduced to eating grass, tree bark, and in some cases, their own relatives. The government suppressed the disaster, refusing international aid and punishing those who spoke out. Only decades later did the full horror begin to emerge. Number 5. World War I, the war that shattered the old world. The First World War, from 1914 to 1918, claimed between 15 and 20 million lives and left Europe in ruins.
Triggered by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the conflict dragged in empires from every continent. Trench warfare made advancement nearly impossible, and entire generations were mowed down by machine guns and artillery. At Verdun, nearly 300,000 men died in a single battle. Chemical weapons added a new layer of horror. On the home front, hunger and influenza swept civilian populations. The war ended with the Treaty of Versailles, but its punitive terms helped sow the seeds of fascism and another global war. For empires, the German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian, collapsed. The psychological wounds endured long after the battlefield fell silent. Number 6. The Indian famine of 1896 to 1902, the empire that watched people starve. Across British-ruled India, between 1896 and 1902, successive famines killed around 19 million people. Drought and failed monsoons played a role, but so did London's policies. British authorities continued to export grain while Indian peasants died of hunger. Colonial ideology resisted free food aid, fearing it would weaken native discipline. Bureaucratic systems delayed relief, and workhouses required physical labor in exchange for meager rations. A British official famously stated, "If people must die, let them die quietly." In cities like Bombay and Madras, emaciated corpses were a daily sight. The famine galvanized Indian nationalist movements and exposed the cruelty of colonial capitalism. Number 7. The Inlushan Rebellion, China's demographic catastrophe. Between 755 and 763, the Tang dynasty endured a civil war that left approximately 36 million dead, a staggering toll in an era when the world's population was just over 200 million. General Inlushan, once favored by the emperor, declared himself ruler of a rival dynasty. His rebellion plunged the empire into chaos, sparking massacres, famines, and mass desertions. Luoyang and Chang'an, two imperial capitals, were devastated. Civilians were forced to abandon their homes and forage for food in war-torn wastelands. The Tang dynasty survived, but only barely. The golden age of Chinese poetry, art, and politics was never fully restored. Number 8. The conquest of the Americas, when the New World was silenced. Beginning in the late 15th century, European conquest of the Americas resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of indigenous people. While Spanish and Portuguese swords inflicted some of the damage, it was European diseases, smallpox, measles, and influenza that wiped out entire civilizations. In Mexico alone, the population dropped from roughly 25 million to just 2 million within a century. The fall of the Aztec and Inca empires was followed by mass enslavement, forced conversion, and cultural erasure. The Columbian Exchange reshaped the planet, but for native peoples, it marked the beginning of centuries of displacement and destruction. Number 9. The Holodomor, starvation as a weapon. In 1932 and 1933, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin engineered a famine in Ukraine so severe that 3 to 7 million people died. Through forced collectivization, inflated grain quotas, and violent grain seizures, Ukrainian villages were left with nothing to eat. Armed guards patrolled fields, confiscating food while the population starved. Those who stole a handful of wheat were executed. Entire communities resorted to eating rodents, tree bark, and worse. Cannibalism was documented in over 2,000 cases. The Soviet Union denied the famine's existence, and foreign journalists were banned or manipulated. Today, many nations recognize the Holodomor as a deliberate act of genocide against the Ukrainian people. Number 10. The Congo Free State, Leopold's forgotten reign of terror. Between 1885 and 1908, King Leopold II of Belgium ruled the Congo not as a colony, but as his personal enterprise. Under his rubber extraction regime, an estimated 10 to 15 million Congolese died from forced labor, starvation, and brutal punishment. Failure to meet rubber quotas meant amputated hands, floggings, or execution. Entire villages were burned as examples. Missionaries and reporters like Edmund Dean Morel and Roger Casement exposed the horror to the world, but only after decades of silence. While Leopold built lavish palaces in Europe, children in the Congo were mutilated for profit.
This atrocity is rarely taught in Western schools, despite being one of the earliest modern genocides.